Hello everyone, this is Source Codex, aka Jazz Fusion Guy, and I thought I'd do a little discussion about my being pulled into the whirlpool of jazz fusion and how it all started for me. I was listening to your straight up rock and roll back in the day. Grand Funk, Railroad, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Mountain, the James Gang, all that good stuff. And then a friend of mine who was a bassist in a band came over to the house and brought an album, the Mahavishnu Orchestra Birds of Fire. He said, "You have got to listen to this." Well, at first I didn't really understand what I was hearing. I listened a little more and I realized this guy McLaughlin on guitar was incredible. And the drummer was incredible, Billy Cobham. Electric violin, I'd never even thought about that. Jerry Goodman from The Flock, he was incredible. Rick Laird, bass player, he did a solid job keeping things going. And then Jan Hammer, synthesizer player in a jazz rock vein. I had never heard anything like this. Well, my neurons, so to speak, got rewired by listening to this album. And then I did some research and I found out, hey, they had an album come out before called The Intermounting Flame. Well, actually, I listened to this album and I really didn't like it. I thought it was really raw compared to Birds of Fire. So I took it back to the store, got my money back, my $2.99 from the local drugstore. But over the next few days, I could not get these tunes out of my head. Vital transformation. You know, just, and the dance of Maya. I was like, wait a minute. And I had to go back and I bought it again. And these two albums by the Mahavishnu Orchestra are probably the things that propelled me into loving jazz rock fusion as much as I do. Now, of course, I saw them live. It was the first band I ever bothered to go see live, and I was amazed. McLaughlin got the whole place quiet so he could start out in total silence. I thought that was amazing. He started in on a slow roll of Birds of Fire, and some idiot screamed from the balcony, "Rock and roll!" But McLaughlin kept going, and we had a wonderful concert experience. Of course, sadly, the egos in this band clashed, and they fell apart. But as you know, McLaughlin went on to reform another group with a whole lot of people playing on this group. My favorite songs on this album are Eternity's Breath Part 1 and Lila's Dance. Can't Stand Your Funk. I hated that song. But, you know, that's just my taste. And I picked this up as well recently. There is a picture right there of the second incarnation of the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Here's John McLaughlin with his specially crafted Rex Bogue double neck guitar. Here we have Jean-Luc Ponty, who went on to do amazing things. The incredible drummer Narada Michael Walden. Ralphie, I call him Ralphie because the E at the end of his first name, Armstrong. And I don't recognize anybody else in there. I think that is Gail Moran. She was on keyboards and vocals. She was actually married to Chick Corea. Another great electric violinist, Steve Kindler, also played with McLaughlin in this group. And he actually played with Jan Hammer in another incarnation. But needless to say, that fell apart too. So then we have McLaughlin on this solo release. Johnny McLaughlin, electric guitarist. New York on My Mind, great song. And then the amazing guitar drums duo, Phenomenon Compulsion, incredible song. And I was surprised at the tenderness and the playing of McLaughlin on My Foolish Heart. Well, the remains of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, Jerry Goodman and Jan Hammer, went on to release an album that I really liked. My favorite songs on here are Country and Eastern Music and Topeka. But still, this is a great album worth looking for. Well, in my fusion-y days, I also came across Jean-Luc Ponty's Enigmatic Ocean, which was the first time I heard Alan Holdsworth on guitar. I think it was one of the Enigmatic Ocean parts, and maybe on another song. I can't remember. But when I heard him, I thought, geez, that's some weird guitar playing. Little did I know it was Alan Holdsworth, and he would later become one of my most famous guitarists on the planet. Now, again, I was checking into Stuart Ham's Radio Free Albemuth. Radio Free Albemuth is a reference to a book by Philip K. Dick, the author who produced Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which turned into the iconic movie Blade Runner. But like I said, Alan Holdsworth is playing on this release, on the first track, the title track. So I thought, that guy's interesting. But it wasn't until this release, UK, with Bill Bruford on drums, Eddie Jobson on electric violin and keyboards, John Wetton on vocals and bass, and then here was Alan Holdsworth on electric guitar. It was this album that made me realize this is some of the most amazing guitar work I have ever heard in my life. And I became an instant fan. Of course, Bruford and Holdsworth left UK. I'm not sure what happened there. Probably an ego collision again, which is so prevalent in bands. And then I heard Bruford's One of a Kind. This is the expanded and remixed version, but hearing Jeff Berlin on bass and Dave Stewart on keyboards, what an amazing album. Just incredible. Again, it had me really locked in on Holdsworth, and I started digging, trying to find where he had played earlier. And I found out he played with Soft Machine, but my favorite work was when he played with Gong. And this is a nice retrospective collective release. And I highly recommend it if you want to hear early Holdsworth. And if you want to basically get just about everything Holdsworth ever released, I recommend you find The Man Who Changed Guitar Forever. Quick commercial. I have 2 of these for sale on eBay, Discogs, and Amazon. Well, that's enough about Holdsworth. The other bands that I sought out and discovered after discovering jazz rock fusion, I discovered Larry Coryell and the 11th House. Just superb music. Lolita was a song that I tried to play over and over on my guitar. I am a guitarist, of course, since '67, and synthesizer player since the early 2000s. But just to let you know, ever since the Mahavishnu Orchestra, I now own several guitars. I own several synthesizers. I own a bass. I own electric drums. And I own an electric violin. It's like I'm trying to be Mahavishnu all by myself. I don't know. That's just me. But the other band that blew me out of the water, the other band that blew me out of the water was Return to Forever, with Bill Connors on guitar, Chick Corea on keyboards, Stanley Clark on bass, and Lenny White on drums. I could not get enough of this album when I first listened to it. Nobody led me to it. I just found it, and I was totally amazed. Unfortunately, Bill Connors left pretty early on, and then they got Al Di Meola to replace Bill Connors. I never really liked Al Di Meola with Return to Forever. They just were not the same. That's in my music reviewer, guitarist, biased opinion. But the album that was released by Return to Forever that blew me out of the water when I heard it was Romantic Warrior. Just amazing. The tightness, the compositions, everybody did wonderful on this. I highly recommend this release. And, you know, being a music reviewer, you'll see a lot of the barcodes have holes marked in them because the labels sent them to me to review because I knew what I was talking about. No brag, just fact. Now, Chick actually encouraged the members of his band early on to do solo releases. And here you go. Stanley Clark, solo release. Amazing. He had Jan Hammer from the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Did he ask Al Di Meola to play guitar? No. He asked Bill Connors from the first version of Return to Forever to play. And you also had just other incredible musicians on here. I can't remember the name right now, but probably the best guitar solo you'll ever hear by Bill Connors was on Life Suite. I don't know what part it was, but if you check my channel, you'll find it. I also really got into Stanley Clark's School Days. And if I'm not incorrect, I discovered another guitarist on here, Raymond Gomez. excellent guitarist. Didn't really release any albums to speak of except for Volume, which wasn't really fusiony that much. Now, Al Di Meola, I think probably his two best releases, Land of the Midnight Sun and Elegant Gypsy. Casino and the rest of them, Electric Rendezvous, Splendido Hotel, very repetitive of the first two releases. So if you're going to have any Al Di Meola, get Land of the Midnight Sun and Elegant Gypsy. Again, we've got Jan Hammer from the Mahavishnu Orchestra doing keyboards on Elegant Gypsy. Okay, some of you probably are saying, but what about Miles Davis? Why didn't that turn you on to fusion? Well, I have bought this extravagant release of Miles Davis's Bitches Brew and DVD and all that. Frankly, it just was a little unstructured for me. I mean, it was the birth of an era for fusion. A lot of people came out of his band. Miles Davis told McLaughlin, you need to form your own band, and supported him big time, got him on the Sony label, which was great for me, great for McLaughlin to finally hear fusion like it really is meant to be played. Joe Zawinul came out of here, Chick Corea, Adam Holzman, the famous guitarist Mike Stern played with Miles Davis. Again, he was a good, so to speak, garden where many great musicians were planted and grew and went on their separate ways. I know there's other musicians I haven't mentioned that came out of the Miles Davis thing, but that's okay. Now, I mentioned that Bill Connors left Return to Forever, and did he go electric? No. He went completely acoustic, and here was his first release, Theme to the Guardian. You know, Guardian is spelled wrong, but Bill Connors argued with the people that were making the cover and said, no, what you're saying doesn't sound right. Spell it like I want. So here you have Theme to the Guardian. It's totally spelled incorrectly, but that's what Bill wanted. And then another great acoustic release, Bill Connors, and this was Swimming with a Hole in My Body. Another great release. Well, in the 80s, I don't have these in order, but Bill Connors returned with a whole different sound, sounding a lot like the Alan Holdsworth legato, which even Alan Holdsworth was saying, hey, he was a great guitarist in the 70s. What is he doing playing legato like I do? So you got three pretty decent releases. They're all kind of rare, hard to come by. I have them for sale on many different websites because I try to support the important things in fusion. Now, later on, I sort of discovered Jaco and Weather Report. And these were a great fusion band to get into, but to be honest, I loved Zawinul's playing on the synths and the keyboards and Jaco's incredible bass playing, but oh my gosh, I missed a guitar. And I know they weren't a guitar band, but they didn't really stay on the top of my list as absolutely wonderful. And, you know, here's a picture I've got of Bill Connors back in the day when he was with Return to Forever. I still love to hear his old stuff. And a lot of his live concerts with Return to Forever are on my channel. So make sure you look them up. Now, a guitarist that came along while I was loving Holdsworth was Scott Mcgill. Good old Scott. He's a really nice guy. Here's an old picture of Scott Mcgill. And there's me, the giant, in the background. This is another fusion guitarist. I can't even think of his name. And these guys were in his hand farm band when he released the album Ripe. I was amazed that after I reviewed his Scott hand farm initial release, when he sent me Ripe to review, lo and behold, my name was in the thanks to. That just blew me away. I was just so ridiculously like a kid, thrilled to see my name in an album. But anyway, what about other fusion bands? What about Steve Morse and the Dixie Dregs? What if my total favorite album of theirs, my total favorite album, song of the Dixie Dregs, Night Meets Light. Just incredible. And, you know, I've got a lot of Dregs. I've listened to a lot coming up through the years. And they all were just solid to me. Now, I was also, you know, I collected albums and whatnot. A little known band, which is highly recommended fusion band, is 3 p.m. and this release, Better Late Than Never, is signed by the whole band. Wheeless could do Return to Forever songs with no problem and had a great Holdsworth legato. Jerry Peake, great bass player, he went to play with the Steve Morse band when the Dregs broke up. And it was a dual guitar attack. We had Bernie and John playing amazing stuff. And I've got this album for sale if you choose to want to look for it. Now, a band a lot of people don't consider fusion because they were big in the progressive rock world is Happy the Man. Of course, I've got this on remastered CDs, but you know, there's something about having the old LPs. And Lord knows, I wore these LPs out. Basically made a cassette and wore the cassette out, listening and listening and listening. Now, the last few fusiony, proggy LPs that I still have, Nova. Now, Nova was basically the guitarist Corrado Rustici, and all the rest of these guys did a wonderful job. If you like fusion with a little bit of prog, I highly recommend Nova. Vimana, I think, is their strongest release, and they had Percy Jones from Brand X playing with them, and Corrado Rustici playing, and the amazing Narada Michael Walden from Mahavishnu version 2. Now, as far as proggy fusion, I know I've recommended this album before, but PFM's Jet Lag, or better known Premiata Forneria Marconi, this is an incredible release. Franco Musita is on guitars. And it's got vocals, but who cares? It sounds great. And I did go ahead, these are very expensive, but I did go ahead and find Nova on CD. Now I'm going to take a slight detour I saw this album in a store in Durham, North Carolina, and I thought, what the heck? You know, this artwork was amazing. And I looked on the back and I thought, this is totally like homemade. And here's this little guy standing by the steps that continue from a weird drawing, and this bizarre looking, very 1970s Roger Crumb kind of stuff. But the guitarist is Steve Tibbetts, with percussion by Mark Anderson, and then the rest of these guys. This album was called Year, Y-R. Totally superb, fusiony, and at the same time very progressive. Here's Year on the ECM label. Totally hate that artwork. But I went on to get a lot of his stuff. Here's a Northern Song, very trippy kind of guitars. Steve Tibbetts, Safe Journey. Steve Tibbetts, Exploded View, a great release. Let's see, and then Big Map Idea, another good release. And then a whole lot of electricity happening on this release, which was The Fall of Us All. But if you like great guitar work, I would say, without a doubt, listen to Steve Tibbetts. Now, I've already said how I really became a huge Alan Holdsworth fan. And I used to write for Progression magazine, which is now defunct. You can still buy back issues, but I also supported and tried to cover local bands in the area. And this was a group out of Raleigh called the Ozone Quartet. You had Hollis Brown on electric violin. Don't remember the guitarist's name. Francis Dyer on drums, and Wayne Leachford played stick. And if you check my channel, you will find many live videos of the Ozone Quartet. Now, in the late 90s is when I started reviewing music. And I wound up touching base with many different artists from around the world. Nico Stefano, in his release Waiting For, I was completely amazed at how he had wonderfully nailed the Holdsworth technique. Great compositions. He's got a new release out that you can find, and an older release than this one that's really hard to find, called Trace of Jazz. But I recommend Nico Stefano. Now, another group that sounds a lot like Holdsworth, basically like Holdsworth on steroids, with a lot of rock thrown in. That's how Scott McGill's Hand Farm also sound. This was their debut release. You can still find it places. I've got copies of it for sale at various places. Then their next release was Full Scrape. And their last release, which you cannot find anywhere, was Lack of Education. I've got a long video about Whoop Nash on my channel. Now, another artist that I came across that I absolutely loved was Steve Kahn. I listened to his Blue Man release, Tightrope, many others, Arrows, which back in the day was really hard to get. I bought this basically a CDR off of eBay, made by a Steve Kahn fan many, many years ago. Now you can get many of his releases all combined together in these combo packs. I highly recommend Steve Kahn Modern Times. It is a live session. Now, somebody I stumbled across, I don't even remember how I discovered him, but it's the late Sean Lane, playing with Jonas Hellborg. And on this release, when I heard it, and I heard the song Rice with Angels, well, I don't know how to say it, but when I was listening to Rice with Angels and Sean Lane's technique, I just started to cry. It was just so amazing, so beautiful, and so fast. Now, I don't know what more to say, but definitely find this album if you're into great guitar playing. And of course, Time is the Enemy. This was another great release. I bought this off of Discogs. Well worth having in your collection if you like great guitar and if you like fusion. Now, there was a time where people said fusion was pretty dead and wimpy and all that other stuff, but along comes Derek Sherinian, Tony McAlpine, Virgil Donati on drums, and I believe, I don't see him on here, but they had different bass players. This album, Planet X Universe, I reviewed it, and I gave it major kudos as just being just outstanding. The only track that I thought was lame was King of the Universe. And when Derek read that review, me saying, everything's great, but why did they do this proggy song? He kind of chuckled in his email to me and he said, this song was basically written as a spoof on progressive rock. So you picked up on it. So I was glad that they weren't serious about that song. Now, the other release of theirs that is just totally awesome, which came out next, was Planet X Moon Babies. Again, the terrible trio of fusion. Talk about heavy. This was about as heavy, progressive, metalloid fusion that you could find at the time. It just sort of blew the paint off the walls. Their stuff was so intense. I highly recommend it. Now, here's a release you're not going to find anywhere unless you want to pay like $150. But Virgil Donati had this group called On the Verge, and they had this release, Serious Young Insects, and a ton of great guitarists on this release. TJ Helmerich, Brett Garsed. Do I need to say any more? But anyhow, this is very hard to find, and I'll fess up to you, this ain't a real release. I got it in a trade many decades ago. But I'm just not going to pay $99 for this thing. It's just not worth that much money to me. Now, a group that's come along, I talked about in an earlier video, and I recommend, is Aurora Clara, Transformation. Jerry Goodman guests, and the guitarist Raul Manola, he does just about all of the compositions. He's kind of like a cross between McLaughlin and Santana mixed together, kind of sounding like that love, devotion, and surrender phase of McLaughlin and Santana. And their second album, Clear Dawn, it's recommended as well. Now, another thing I bought recently that I found really good was Gong's Live in Sherwood Forest, 1975. And if nobody's ever heard Steve Hillage play guitar, you're really missing out. The guy tears a Stratocaster to pieces. And my last thing I'll discuss in this video about my history and experiences with fusion is I came across this release, Steve Morris Live in Connecticut, with the Cruise Control DVD. I haven't watched the DVD yet, but I listened to the CD parts, and I found them to be quite impressive. Now this thing sells for an ungodly amount of money on eBay. I've seen it as high as upward around $125. I don't get that. I didn't pay anywhere near that amount of money for this. Well, I've gone on and on talking about my experience with fusion. I still listen to it. I am just I don't know how to say it. I just haven't found anything that satisfies to me as a guitar player listening to fusion, be it a trio, a quartet, or even more guys in the band. I just really appreciate it. I hope in some way you guys have learned something about this, that, and the other about fusion. Scott has gone on to be a great guitar teacher and helper for young guitarists. He's located in the UK. Bill Connors, as far as I know, he's pretty much retired from performing, and he is a teacher as well. McLaughlin, he's still putting out music, still recording. Jean-Luc Ponty, he's 80 years old now, so he's kind of toned back things. I mean, he did a lot of live playing recently, but I don't think he's doing much anymore as far as releasing albums. And Steve Tibbetts, he's still putting albums out. I don't think he's going to stop doing that. But like I say, I hope you guys have learned something out there about fusion. But the guy I would say who never lost focus all the way to the day he died was Alan Holdsworth. He always had that fusion sense about him. He was just a genius. If you haven't heard his music, you need to. Just get on YouTube and type in Alan Holdsworth, and there'll be something there for you to check out. Now, I know I have not covered all the fusion bands out there. I just didn't have time. So for right now, we're going to sign off, and I might put some links in underneath this video at the bottom, as they say, some shopping links, so you can find some of these CDs if you are indeed interested in buying them. All right, signing off.